You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I'm joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. Another Tuesday night. We got the wild card round of the super wild card round, right? That's what they're calling it in the books. So it's kind of fun having 3 straight days of NFL playoff action. I do kind of like how they spread that out and hit all the primetime viewing slots. Games all kind of stunk, honestly, but the atmosphere was fun. It was fun to see playoff football.
It was hilarious to see how the Cowboys-Niners game ended. I, of course, I am in the heart of Texas, and so it was really funny to listen to all of the local sports talk radio stations just have absolute meltdowns, along with several of my coworkers who are Cowboys fans, to see them have meltdowns on Monday. But I thought it was fitting that a game that featured so many mental mistakes by the Cowboys ended on a mental mistake by the Cowboys, a mistake that they truthfully should not have had the opportunity to make. But nevertheless, they Cowboysed all over the place, and the Niners moved on.
Did you just use the Cowboys as a verb?
As a verb,
so
to
bravo,
me,
sir.
Displeasurable.
Yeah, the last play of the game was very interesting nonetheless, but you're not going to win a playoff game committing 14 penalties. You're not going to win a playoff game basically letting your opposition do pretty much whatever they want in the first half. You're not going to win a playoff game when you can't convert on third down. You're not going to win a playoff game when you complete less than 60% of your passes. Like, the list goes on. Like, everyone's so focused on this one play, and it's not the play. Like, it's the last thing people remember, but it was the 59 minutes and 45 seconds before the final play that cost the Cowboys that game. It was not the final 15 seconds.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it was just one of the games, I didn't even bother to try and seek out that Eagles-Buccaneers game just because it went exactly the way I thought it would, where it was complete and utter domination. The Eagles had no business even being in the playoffs. They snuck their way in. And really, I think this leads to a larger discussion that we could get into if you guys wanted to, is that, it's exciting that the 7th best team in each conference gets into the playoffs. But holy cow, is there such a discrepancy between 2 and 7? Neither of those 2-7 matchups were very entertaining, unless you were a fan of the 2-seed teams. So I think there's something to be said there that, yes, it's exciting watching somebody get into that 7th seed, because we were all on the edge of our seats, week 18, right? Trying to figure out, well, if the Chargers and the Raiders tie, we've got, chaos. The Steelers are out. And so, the NFL, I think what they wanted, they got out of it, which was intrigue literally to the last snap of the regular season about the playoff picture. But then, oh boy, was it kind of a dud that first week of the playoffs. So I think for the common football fan, or, the fantasy football fan like we are, we have, rooting interest in some of these games, even though, our fantasy leagues are done. We're still doing, some other things. But I think the NFL got what it wanted in terms of making the regular season finales exciting. But at the same time, my goodness, those 2-7 matchups, it just was not there. It just was not it.
Well, and really, Alex, I'd argue that most of the games were not there. Like, the closest game was the Niners-Cowboys game, right? And the Niners really controlled that whole game. Like, it did not feel like the Cowboys were coming back, no matter what they did. The Monday night game with the Rams and the Cardinals was a blowout. Obviously, both 2-7 games was a blowout. The Bengals held the Raiders at bay for pretty much that entire game. They were trading touchdowns and field goals there for a little bit. And in the second half, the Bengals let off the gas a little bit, and I think they realize that they can't do that going forward. And then, the Bills Patriots game, like, holy shellacking! Like, none of these games were ultra competitive, but the thing that I loved seeing last night from a home league fantasy perspective was Cam Akers. Cam Akers looked like a man on a mission. Cam Akers, 17 carries, 55 yards, one reception for 40 yards. Doesn't seem all that great, but he did lose 54 yards of production due to offensive penalties. One big reception also that I didn't even add into that he dropped on his own. That wasn't even a penalty, but he dropped a wheel route there on the wasn't even a wheel route. He just beat the linebacker there off to the side and didn't track the ball well and dropped it. And a couple big runs that came back. Like, he looked like a man on a mission. And boy, oh boy, am I salivating the possibility of keeping him at a 22nd round value because of this torn Achilles for our season in 2022. But no, he looked good. The Rams defense looked amazing. And we'll get into this here a little later, but I think Raheem Morris just earned himself a head coaching gig with the defensive performance that the Rams put up on Monday night.
Yeah, the Cardinals did look like a shell of themselves from what they saw in the first half of the season, and certainly didn't look anything like what we had seen there, right? And you saw that happen with several of these teams throughout the playoffs there, that they certainly – you had some teams that got hot right at the right time and really peaked, and they're showing up and showing out here in the playoffs. And you had other teams that kind of coasted on fumes, it seemed like, and was still very much in that kind of mindset as they rock and roll through the playoffs there. The Cardinals being one of those. The Patriots at one point were the number one seed in the AFC side of things, and then they just kind of faded down the stretch there. And we had a lot of that kind of continue through there as well. But for the most part, you could even argue that even if before they expanded the playoff into the 17 thing, that the way that those teams would have played out there and the way that things would have went through, that I don't know that, even the 3-6 matchups and the 4-5 matchups weren't that compelling either, to your point that you were making, Kevin. Like, this was not one of those that there was really a game with much intrigue outside of Dallas and the 49ers. And that one wasn't close until late into the second half.
Here's a fun thought experiment, and Kevin, I don't mean to cut you off here. If you got something to add to that, I can get back to my. Okay, so here's a fun thought experiment. Would you rather watch the 2-7, knowing what we know? This is what we know, right? Would you rather watch the 2-7 matchups from here on out, or the college football playoff semifinals? You can only choose to watch one or the other. Which one are you picking?
The college football playoff semifinals.
They've both. My thought, or my point here is, they've both been about as equally competitive. Each. And granted, we have a very small sample size with the 2-7 matchup for the NFL playoffs, as 7 seeds are now 0-2 all time in the NFL playoffs. We long to see the day of a UMHB going up against a Virginia, and the dreaded 16-1 upset, like we saw a couple years back in the college basketball tournament. But I think competitive wise, I mean, that's about the level of competitiveness that we saw. The 7 very outmatched. Likewise, the 4 seed has been very outmatched in the college football playoff semifinal. And same for the 3. I think the 3 is also not fared so well. Double check me on that if you guys know. But
for the most part, the average score has been about a 21-point margin. It's been about a 3-point margin in those semifinal college semifinal playoff games. So it has not been close. Now, there's been some examples that they've had some close games and some things go to it. I believe that even the first year Ohio State or the second year Ohio State, when they won their national championship, came in as the 4 seed and did that. So there's been some examples of some upsets there, but for the most part, the average on that has been the higher seed wins convincingly on average by about 3 touchdowns.
Again,
Yeah.
to further my point that I made earlier, it's just while the 7 seed in theory is great in practice so far, and again, small sample size, it's only been 2 games. In practice, does not make
Yeah.
for competitive football.
No, that's true. Yeah. To go back to this, I think one of the differences is it's the Final Four in college
Right.
football, right? Because it is a semifinal, so it does have a little bit more intrigue than your wild card round of the playoffs. But you guys are absolutely right. The margin of victory has not been uh, impressive. And Derek, I think you would agree with me. I know we have different opinions on the outcome of the game, but the most exciting college
Yes.
football semifinal was the Rose Bowl between Oklahoma and Georgia,
Yeah.
where Oklahoma stormed out of the gates and just started putting it to Georgia, and everyone thought SEC defense what? And then the second half, the script flipped a little bit, and Georgia's defense tightened up, and they hammered back in, and then the game went into overtime. And I know you and I sat on opposite ends of that spectrum, but it was an entertaining semifinal. Like that is
Right.
what you want in your playoff games. And outside of that, we haven't seen that really in any college football semifinal or up to this point wild card round performances out of the NFL. So it is a mixed bag. But yeah, I'll take a semifinal any day over a wild card round.
I think I would agree with you as well. So it's a fun thought experiment. I liked it, Alex. Let's keep those coming and going. So I like it a lot. Guys, any other thoughts here on the wild card weekend?
The Chiefs, once they woke up, looked so dominant. And again, a 2-7 matchup. But for that first quarter, the Steelers did a good job looking like they might have that team on tilt, right? They had the Chiefs in bad field position, a couple weird turnovers, like they got that defensive touchdown, like and for half a second you're thinking, ooh, the Steelers, like they might be showing out for Big Ben here. And then Patrick Mahomes said after, we were pissed and we needed to play like it. And we finally did. And boy, did they turn it on, because that defensive touchdown came and the beast was awakened. And it was oogly. But my biggest, going back to that Bills Patriots game, guys, I think that Bill Belichick did everything he could with this team in the pain points that they had, right? They didn't have any standout receivers. They had a rookie quarterback. Their defense up to that point was second in the league in points allowed. And the Bills just had their number. Like it's because Tom Brady's gone, and the Patriots in the playoffs don't scare anybody right now. So it was intriguing. I also thought that it was very intriguing that the more veteran team won every playoff game. Just looking at roster composition and where they have guys offensively and defensively, the team with a larger veteran presence won every game. And that speaks to the mental attrition in the NFL, right? That you need to get through 18 games and then playoffs and guys who have been there. And the thing we say, it's kind of cliche to say, right? Like it's the team that gets hot going into the playoffs. But this year, I think with the exception of the Rams, who blew the 17-point lead to the Niners in week 18, the hot team did win every game. Like it was the Bills who atoned against the Patriots back in week, what was it? They played in week 14 and then atoned for it in week 17 and carried it on out. It was the Niners who scraped and clawed their way back in there. The Cardinals were fading down the stretch, and it showed. The Cowboys were kind of limping down the stretch, even though they were winning games. No one was super impressed by them, and it showed. Like it was very evident that veteran quarterback play and just veteran leadership in the locker room prevailed in Wild Card Weekend.
I will say there, the one exception to that was the Cincinnati Vegas matchup with young Joe Burrow, and while Derek Carr, not much playoff experience, a veteran quarterback, but the cards were stacked against Vegas, all season long. The fact that they even made the playoffs was a minor miracle in itself. And I'm trying to figure out, if, obviously when we'll talk about this a little bit later about, kind of our thoughts on what we think is going to happen with the coaching, carousel that's about to go down. But I think, with Vegas, with how vocal that Derek Carr was for Rich Bisaccia, one of those two, for their interim coach to stick around and get the interim tag removed. If he finds himself, looking for a new place to play, because Mark Davis wants to get, a new GM, a new coach, and a quarterback to go with that coach. Somebody who aligns with that. So we'll see. I think it's hilarious how the NFL continues to stay in the national headlines. We are more than a week past Black Monday, where obviously it's not a great day for NFL head coaches, and we're still seeing firings happen around the league. With the Texans waiting a couple days, and then the Raiders just on Monday night getting rid of Mike Mayock. So it's been interesting how they continue to keep. We had 3 days of football, and yet there was still more to consume from the league, even beyond the actual football games that were being played.
Yeah.
So, Derek, you tell me if we have time for this little exercise, and if we do, great, and if not, we'll table it and we'll put a more structured segment around it. But
sure, what do you got?
We've seen 19 weeks of NFL football right now. We are through the wild card weekend of the playoffs. There are 32 NFL teams. How many franchise quarterbacks are there in the NFL? True franchise quarterbacks.
7, 8.
We're saying like long-term sustainability, because like Tom Brady's a franchise quarterback, but he's not. He's a rental, right?
That in there, but I'm going to say probably.
Would you feel comfortable, even if it's a short-term run, starting a franchise with Tom Brady at your helm?
Yep.
And then building a team around him? Like that's all part of the encompassing of what you would consider a franchise quarterback. You can go for the long run or the short sprint, as the Buccaneers have done, and both can work.
Well, we saw the same thing happen when Peyton came to Denver, right? Like, so yes, I would say that there's probably no more than 10 realistically in there. And I'm kind of defining that franchise quarterback, the guy that can absolutely lead your team, to the promised land, carrying the team with him far more so than some of these other quarterbacks, and seeing what we've seen where quarterbacks that win the Super Bowl, the formula for that has been you get a young quarterback on his rookie deal so that you can spend the money other places to put the pieces around him to go out there and win that. But if we're talking an actual NFL franchise quarterback, I don't know that there's more than 8 and maybe 10. So I would say that there's only probably a quarter to a third of the league that has their franchise quarterback, and everybody else at this point you're just kind of filling in around that.
Yeah, a third feels about right. Around 10. I'm just kind of going through here, seeing, who teams that have quarterback, and a third feels right. Kevin, why don't you go? Give me your thoughts on it real quick while I ponder this a little further.
I think Derek is right in that 8 to 10 range. Now, I do think that everybody probably has a similar top 6, and then after that is where it splits off a little bit. Lamar Jackson comes to mind, right? Like Lamar Jackson is great for fantasy football, has been great for fantasy football. But is he really a franchise quarterback? Because that's the situation that the Ravens now face going into this offseason, right? Like, is Lamar Jackson a franchise quarterback? I'd argue that he's not. Personally. And the flip side is we came into this season not only in fantasy, but just general NFL sentiment was the quarterbacks in the NFL have never been as good from top to bottom as they are now.
Yeah.
I would argue that now that the season is over for, 3/4 of the league, that is no longer the sentiment that we had coming into opening day of the NFL season back on September 3rd or 4th, whatever it was.
Right.
But I mean, I think there's basically one in each division.
I've gone through the teams here now, and I come up with 11.
11.
All right, I want to hear them.
Okay, so the Cardinals.
So Kyler.
Yeah, the Cowboys.
Dak.
The Packers.
Rodgers.
As far as we're concerned, he's still on their roster.
Well, he's a franchise quarterback, right? Even if he goes to another team, he still carries that type of designation. I would give that to you.
The Rams.
Stafford, maybe.
The Seahawks.
Again, maybe.
The Bucks.
Okay, I'll give you Brady.
The Ravens, the Bills, the Bengals. That AFC North is the Chiefs, the Chargers, and that's it.
Okay. Yeah, I
argue a couple of those right off the bat.
Yeah, I would too. And I tell you what, let's put a pin in this one, because I think that there's a lot of different avenues we can go down here, and I think this is this would be a very fun thought exercise that we can do next week, and we can put some time into this one. I liked where this one's going. So guys, make sure you tune in next week where we bring you the conclusion to this conversation, because I have a feeling that we're going to get into this one and really get into some deep analysis on this one. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I like it. Let's go ahead and head on over into a guess that player. So, right, one of those things that we always, when we're going through a lot of these things, we always kind of say, take the name out of it and look at the stats, look at where that comes to play. So prepared something for you. So you get to go through and you get to figure out a blind player on this one, right? You get the stats on this one, no looking it up. You got to go through and figure out what player this is. And I'll give you some hints. It's a running back from this past year in 2021. Here we go. All righty, so guess that player in the 2021 season. This running back had 202 carries for 929 rushing yards, 15 rushing touchdowns, 18 receptions, 20 targets, and 132 receiving yards. What are we thinking?
Elijah Mitchell.
Yeah, Alex, what's your guess?
Damn. I was going to go Derrick Henry.
You are both incorrect. Would you like one more guess?
James Conner.
Nope. I can see where you went with that, though, with the 15 rushing touchdowns. Alex, last guess.
Jonathan Taylor.
No.
Did he get up over 1,000?
Yeah, he was over 1,000.
Yeah, he was well over 1,000. Would you guys care to venture a guess as far as where this running back finished in a range? Just whether it was a top 12, a top 15, top 20, guesses on that?
It feels like with the rushing touchdowns, I would say top 12.
Okay. Kevin, what you got?
Maybe not with the
receptions are down half. Yeah. I mean, I definitely top 20. I think probably verge of top 15.
Okay. All righty. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one. And so this one's going to be a little bit of a surprise here for y'all. And it was Damian Harris who finished RB number 13 in half-point PPR scoring for the New England Patriots there. So one of those that this guy was, reason I kind of brought him up there on this one was kind of flew under the radar a little bit for a lot of that production there, right? Like was one of those that this was a valuable draft piece for your fantasy team here and really didn't get much hype going into draft season, but certainly produced, especially down the stretch when he was putting up just week after week after week of touchdowns galore. While the rushing attempts may not have been through the roof, the workload may not have been heavy, still did a ton to finish as what was probably the third RB that you drafted on your team. So lots of fun there. So yeah, well, and if you guys have some thoughts that you want out there that you want me to try and stump Alex or Kevin with, going forward on these ones. Hit us up. You know the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Good Old Boys FF. Send me your thoughts here, and we'll put some of those on here. We're going to keep this one going. Should be a lot of fun there. Guys, let's go ahead and drop down into the divisional round for this coming week, some of the matchups there. What one kind of stands out to you? Which one are you guys excited about here for the NFL Divisional Round?
I like most of these games. Like the game that I'm probably least excited about is the Titans Bengals.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have not been on the Titans, bandwagon at all this season, especially after Derrick Henry went down. I don't know that I'm going to start now, and I don't know that the Bengals are going to win that game. The Titans have been playing well and keep surprising me, so they're the number one seed for a reason. All those things. So I don't know that I'm betting against the Titans, but it does seem to be the game that I care least about. Like, I'm really excited for these other three games, though. Like, Bills, Chiefs, Niners, Packers, Bucks, Rams. Like, this is all a lot of fun. And the Packers-Niners game with all the history behind it, right? And then the Packers finally getting that over the hump this season with beating the Niners after the last couple times just getting absolutely kind of embarrassed by San Francisco and winning that game by 3 and an amazing comeback from Aaron Rodgers and company. What was it? No timeouts, 56 seconds, and they still kicked a game-winning field goal. Like, that's it was a great game this season. So I'm going to like watching all of them. There's a lot of high-profile players on every single team. Big name quarterbacks across the board. I think Ryan Tannehill and Jimmy G are the two that might be kind of the second tier, if you will. But the other 6 quarterbacks are all, awesome young or awesome Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks. So it's going to be I'm expecting a really good round. As bad as the wild card round was, I am expecting the opposite this weekend for these 4 games.
Doesn't it feel like the AFC Championship game is being played this weekend? Like, doesn't it feel like that? How sometimes sometimes the matchup that you think should be in the championship game for the conference or hell for even the Super Bowl sometimes, it's the 2 best teams are meeting up a week too early, just because of the way that things shook out. So to me, that's what this Bills Chiefs game, feels like. This would have been a great AFC Championship game. And you'd have to think that whoever wins that game is going to have an extraordinarily heavy betting line into the AFC Championship game over those other 2 teams, regardless, of who comes out of it. So that's the most intriguing one. And the Bengals Titans one, to me, it feels the most up in the air in terms of what the outcome could be. Like, we know that the Titans are good, right? Obviously they were the number 1 seed, but the Bengals are playing really good football right now, and they seem to have figured something out. So that one to me feels like the most up in the air. I think the other ones are pretty well decided in that the NFC side, I should say, because the Bills Chiefs to me is also up in the air. Like, I don't know anything. I'm not sure about that one. That one's going to be, very crazy. So the AFC feels up in the air. The NFC kind of feels like it's spoken for. I think if Matt Stafford can play another, clean-ish game, then they have a chance against the Buccaneers. I think the Niners have injuries that are going to be too hard to overcome on defense, and the Packers with a week off for that, more veteran team, you give them another week to rest up. Feels like, that game's probably going to be decided within the first half. And I think likewise to me, I think that Bucks Rams game is decided in the first half. That's tough to go, all the way across the country to have to play on a shorter week than the Buccaneers had. So, yeah, the AFC to me is the more intriguing side because I just don't know what's going to happen. Whereas the NFC feels like it's it's already almost preordained that we're going to get Rodgers Brady in that NFC Championship game.
Here's why I think the Rams win that game. And we saw it when Tampa Bay went to LA, it's the pressure up the middle. It is the Aaron Donald effect. And now that they've added Von Miller, who has played a number of high-profile games against Tom Brady and generally has played very well in those games against Tom Brady, I do think that the Rams' defensive line is the deciding factor in this game. Like they have the depth in the secondary. I shouldn't say safety, but they have the depth at linebacker and cornerback to be able to at least try and do some different things with Mike Evans and Gronkowski and try and play to Tom Brady's secondary strengths as opposed to his primary strengths. And the Rams get to him up front. Aaron Donald is a beast, and we saw how disruptive that defensive line was. And I do think that Tristan Wirfs, the left tackle for the Buccaneers, I don't know that he's going to play. And if they're down your starting left tackle going into a game like this with the pass rushers that the Rams have, it's going to be tough. The Buccaneers need Leonard Fournette this game. This is not something that Keyshawn Vaughn and Le'Veon Bell and Giovanni Bernard can handle. Like, you need to find a way for playoff Lenny to come back in this game and be able to take some of that pressure off and at least have that big body presence of, we at least need to pay attention to this guy, because I don't think they care very much about Gio, Lev Bell, and Keyshawn Vaughn.
Yeah, I like it. Let's. This entire round is going to be a lot of fun and a lot of interesting things to watch there. Let's go ahead and throw it out there for anybody that wants to do some DFS type of stuff. We're running a DFS little contest over there on FanDuel. You can go ahead and DM us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We'll shoot you the invite. You can play against the boys here on this one. But guys, how did you do last week in the for the wild card side of things? We had a couple of different contests here. Go ahead and call out your wins or your losses or your middle of the roads.
Well, I only got in on one. So by the time I went to fill out my Sunday, the group was full. So I only got in on the Saturday action. And of the three of us, only two of us filled out a roster spot. Life got in the way for Derek. But I was able to clip Kevin. Yeah, and I finished about a point and a quarter better than Kevin was. And that was thanks in large part to a nice showing from Joe Burrow and CJ Uzoma, who gave me a big lift there. But Devin Singletary was really the gem of the whole team. Got 22.9 points, his 2 tutties on 81 yards and 16 carries. That was really a pleasant surprise, because I didn't expect that out of Devin Singletary.
Yeah, where you played Singletary, I played Stevenson, and that hurt, right? Because the Patriots got in the hole deep, and the run game was pretty non-effective for them, and it definitely hurt playing Stevenson that game. I got the Kendrick Bourne pick right, which, little consolation, but still point and a quarter too short, and ended up taking fourth on a lineup that, when I said it, I felt pretty damn good about it.
Yeah, and I was a non-contestant on that one, so
you got
that's all right, because we were both, Alex and I were non-contestants on the Sunday and Monday games because life got in the way for us.
Yep, exactly. So I had the JOB happen on Saturday, and you guys both had lots of things going on Sunday and Monday. So my Sunday and Monday contests were both middle of the road. Nothing to write home about. Wasn't in the top, wasn't in the bottom, was literally dead set in the middle on both of those guys. So Again, nothing really to write home about there, but that's okay. We're going to go bigger and better this week, and we'll bring our A game and make sure that we get entries entered before that Saturday lock time this time. So that way I can play I can play against y'all. So should be a lot of fun. Again, guys, if you want to play against the boys here in a DFS contest, we're running that thing over on FanDuel. You can hit us up on the socials. We'll shoot you a link. You can hop in there and play with us. It'll be a lot of fun. Make sure that you're hopping in there, giving us a run for the bragging rights here. All right, guys, let's go ahead and we started talking a little bit about the coaching carousel, things like that, and we gave a lot of our predictions last week. And so, if we have any other predictions or changes, we'll throw them out there. But I did want to kind of open this one up with a conversation real quick about a lot of the stuff we touched on, some of the stuff coming out about Dallas and a lot of things going. And we saw coming out in the news the last couple of days here that is Mike McCarthy the head coach there? Is it too soon to move on? Do they need to move on? Things like that. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I saw a lot of folks out there clamoring for the fact that they should replace Mike McCarthy with Dan Quinn, with Kellen Moore, and elevate one of those coordinators up to it. And a lot of the reasoning that I'm seeing behind that is the fact that that Mike McCarthy, a lot of folks are saying he didn't have that team prepared to play that game, things like that. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this one because I certainly had some, but I wanted to get some other input on this one.
The biggest problem the Dallas Cowboys have is their owner and GM. And it is the same guy, and his name is Jerry Jones. Like, he does not empower his team to do these things. He wants to have his fingerprint on absolutely everything. And when you don't empower not only the coaches, but for the most part, these players to take ownership and leadership inside the locker room, you have misses like this because you don't have players and coaches that can hold the rest of the team and themselves accountable for subpar performances and lapses of judgment and miscues that need to be corrected and all the things. The Monday Night Crew on ESPN was talking about this, right? With Steve Smith and Randy Moss were talking about this, and they said very much the same thing that I just said. It's clear Jerry wants to meddle, right? And that's the problem. The Cowboys do have a roster talented enough to compete and win a Super Bowl. I just truly believe that they do. But you meddle and you tinker and you play with and you go on your radio show and call out your franchise quarterback according to Alex, and when you do that, you're taking the voice and the voices and leadership away from the locker room. And as long as that continues, it doesn't matter if Vince Lombardi comes back from the grave, y'all. Like, the Cowboys are going to struggle to be competitive deep into the playoffs when you have an owner that just tinkers and pisses and moans and touches everything.
I really wish we could get into this. Really do tune in next week about this franchise quarterback talk. But I think that's basically what it is. Jerry Jones cannot get out of his own way. And so that's their biggest issue. As for Mike McCarthy, I mean, we saw Jason Garrett was employed by Jerry Jones for 10 years because Jason Garrett knew that he knew what the situation was. He understood what was going on. And if you can do that, you can stay gainfully employed for a long time. I mean, Jason Garrett, did he even last a full season in New York? Exactly.
Nope.
Like, so when Jerry finds his guy, right, I think he will stay with his guy. It's been that way for a while, with the exception of there was a couple coaches after after Jimmy Johnson that didn't last very long.
Parcells.
Yeah, and again, that's because Parcells isn't going to take squat from Jerry Jones, right? Like Parcells is going to stand up for himself and tell Jerry how he wants to see things run. And as long as you're a man towing the company line in the Dallas Cowboys facility, you're gonna stick around for a while. So
It's the NFL version of the Yankees, not only in clout across the country, but in how the owner handles the team. But the
right,
biggest difference is the NFL has a hard cap. Baseball
right.
doesn't. So you can have these arguments in baseball and still bring in a high profile, highly paid free agent to build through that way. The NFL, you don't have that luxury. You have your hard cap, and this season it was $197.6 million. You can't go over it, y'all. Like that is it. There is no, well, we'll just pay
Luxury tax.
the luxury tax and bring this guy in, and his extra $30 million a year will put us over the top.
Yeah. So as long as Mike McCarthy stays and toes the company line, I think he's got a job as the Cowboys head coach. Unfortunately, I think both of those coordinators are gone after this year, and in order to build upon a previous year, it's nice to have that stability. I think we've seen it time and time again, how many quarterbacks have had to learn a new offense with a new offensive coordinator, and you just get comfortable with the plays that are being called. I mean, learning a playbook is like learning a new language, in a lot of ways, because each guy has what they call things, differently based on where they've, learned the game. So unfortunately, I think, both of those coordinators leave, which again is going to put the Cowboys right back at competitive, but not championship caliber. And that's just the cycle that they're going to be stuck in for, I think, a long time. And you know what? Like, as much as Jerry Jones is going to say, like, oh, I want to win another Super Bowl, I want to win another Super Bowl. As long as he is calling the shots, I don't see them winning another Super Bowl with him at the helm. With him as the GM and the owner, until he relinquishes some control and gets real football people. And I know Jerry's been around the game for a long time, but the second he just lets the team kind of do its own thing and he just writes the checks and shakes hands and kiss babies, like, that's when the Cowboys will win. But how long have we been talking about this? 20 years that it's been like this for the Dallas Cowboys.
Closer to 30.
Exactly. So it's not going to happen until Jerry gets out of the way.
I would agree with all of that you just said. And one thought that I kept coming back to when I kept reading these things, that they need to get rid of McCarthy. They need to put and elevate one of these coordinators to it. This was not a game where either side of the ball looked like it functioned well, right? Like, this was not a well-disciplined team on defense or a well-disciplined team on offense. Like, there were mental mistakes all across the board on that one. And so, like, at that point, right, like, I get why you could put that on the head coach, because that's kind of where the buck stops on a lot of the game preparation, things like that. But when it's all said and done, like, I don't know that the fact that these coordinators are – it's got to be in the back of their mind that they're interviewing for head coaching jobs the next, the day after, the 2 days after this game's over. And while I'm sure that they put on all their prep work and they did all of that, but when it's all said and done, like, neither one of those sides of the ball looked exceptional on that game either way, right? And if that was the case, right, and if either one of these coordinators was truly ready to take over that team in Dallas, you would have seen that side of the ball step up, and you would have seen that side of the ball run truly a clean deal, and they would have been firing. They would have been going through on that. Like, that's one of those things that I have a hard time believing that your answer lies in one of your coordinators when their side of the ball didn't step up and didn't play, well in a playoff game either. Like, it doesn't make sense to me why the thought is there. But any other thoughts on that?
Dan Quinn coached teams have never been, what's the right word? Disciplined. They weren't disciplined in Seattle, but the Legion of Boom was so good that, their holding penalties and PI penalties, they were able to kind of get themselves out of because they were so dynamic in that cover three that they ran. The Atlanta Falcons teams that Dan Quinn coached were not disciplined at all. They had tons and tons of penalties, offensively and defensively, that just killed drives and made life really tough on Matt Ryan and company down there. And we saw it here in Dallas as well on the defensive side of the ball. Are they dynamic and opportunistic? Yes, it was a ball hawking team. They wanted to create splashy plays and turnovers. But when it came down to it and you had to line up 11 on 11 and play sound-minded football for a drive or two with the game on the line, the Cowboys failed almost every single time because they were not disciplined enough to play mistake-free football.
I like it. Alex, any other thoughts there? Alrighty. Well, let's go ahead and we'll hit up the coaching carousel here real quick, right? And so for the Raiders, all three of us said the interim, Rich Bisaccia, should get the head coaching job there. Any changes that you guys want to make to the Raiders?
I don't think it's going to be him, but I'm not sure who it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be him anymore. With Mayock getting axed on Monday, I don't think it's going to be Bisaccia anymore.
Okay, that's always an interesting thing. They finally make it to the playoffs, and the GM gets the axe on that one.
His drafts were terrible, though. He had horrible decisions and player personnel. None of his draft picks have none of his draft picks panned
first
out.
Rounders, yeah.
They've lost 2 first rounders, a second and a third rounder over the last 3 seasons. You just drafted these guys; they're still on their rookie deals, and you've either traded them away or released them completely. Mike Mayock. He wasn't all right. He wasn't a good judge of talent when he was with the NFL Network, and he was doing their draft
Senior
coverage.
Bowl,
and doing all that stuff. He wasn't a good judge of talent then. He was just the senior guy that they kept putting up to be the face of everything. But realistically, it was it was a bad decision to bring him out of retirement to begin with, and the Raiders have learned the hard way.
Yes. Alrighty. So that being the case, let's go ahead and move on over to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Alex, you said Peterson. Kevin, you said Jim Caldwell. I said Bill O'Brien. Any changes you guys are wanting to make for the Jags?
I'm not changing it. They should bring Jim Caldwell in. I don't think they will, but that's who they should bring in.
Yeah, I'm going to stay with Doug Peterson based on his previous experience with a young quarterback.
I'm going to switch over, and I'm going to also go Doug Peterson there as well on that one. So let's go ahead and head on into the Broncos. Alex, you said Dan Quinn. Kevin, you originally said Brian Flores, and I said Eric Bieniemy. Any changes that you guys are making here?
No, I wish it was Brian Flores. I really do, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I don't think it's going to either, and I think it's leaning towards Dan Quinn now. Just the ties with George Payton and Quinn have had, and I think if the Cowboys can find a way to keep one of their 2 coordinators, I think Jerry's going to keep Kellen Moore because he's kind of his diamond in the rough, much like Jason Garrett was, 15 years ago. I think Dan Quinn's probably going to be the guy for the Broncos, and I don't know that excites me very much as a Broncos fan.
No, it does not. I'm going to stick with Bieniemy because that's just the one that I'm hoping for there. Dolphins, Alex, you said Josh McDaniel. Kevin, you said Kellen Moore, and I said Brian Leftwich. You also said Nathaniel Hackett was another option you had, Kevin. Any thoughts that you guys are going with here?
It's kind of unfair because I know that Hackett was doing some interviews last week, but I don't know that McDaniels is really in the market anymore. So I'll withdraw that name, but again, not 1,000% sure what they're gonna go with. But I don't think it'll be McDaniels.
Okay.
I was thinking Kellen Moore until kind of all this eruption came out of Dallas, and I have pivoted away from that. Like, I do think he's going to go through his round of interviews so teams can kind of see what he's all about. Um, I don't think he's ready for a head coaching job, as we've seen with not being able to really get his team in the right position to win games against playoff type competition all season long. Like, it wasn't just this game, it was all season long. The Cowboys, the only playoff team they beat were the Eagles twice. Like, outside of that, it was a bust. So I do think Nathaniel Hackett's going to get a crack here. They're going to go to a more offensive minded head coach, try and utilize Jalen Waddle, see what they have in Tua. You have Gesicki there, and try and bring some of that clout from Green Bay down to South Beach.
I like it. I'm going to stick with Brian Leftwich. Vikings, let's go ahead and head there. Alex, you said Todd Bowles. Kevin, you said Nathaniel Hackett. And I said Dan Quinn. Any changes we're wanting to make here?
You know what's funny is, like, I still follow some Vikings stuff, but I've seen more about their GM search than I have their head coach search. So I think that's what they're trying to figure out first.
Yep.
And I hope that, I mean, this might be the most Vikings thing to ever do, but is, that they take so long on this GM search that they might miss the boat on some of these head coaches. So that could be a very, very interesting thing, but I'll stick with Todd Bowles. But I really, the way that this is appearing now is, once they get the GM in place, then things will really start to move. And I think we'll get a good idea as to who the next head coach is going to be based on ties to who the new GM will be.
I completely agree with that. The Vikings are dead set on getting the GM in place first. That way he can have a say in bringing his guy in as the head coach.
Or she.
Yes, sorry. And doing all that. So I think my Nathaniel Hackett prediction from last week is kind of moot at the moment. And we will have to kind of table it until we see what the Vikings do at GM first.
Yep, that was also what I had Dan Quinn. I'm going to say that is not anymore, and wait and see approach on this one. All right, Bears. Alex, you said Brian Leftwich. Kevin, you originally said Dan Quinn. I said either Brian Leftwich or Jim Harbaugh on that one. Guys, any changes you're wanting to make?
I'm sticking with Leftwich, but your guys' answers do intrigue me.
I'm switching over to Jim Harbaugh. I'm seeing a lot of rumblings come out of there. I think that, again, a team that's looking for a GM also, so it is a little bit harder to gauge this, but it does seem like the Bears are trying to do a little bit of both at the same time, more so than the Vikings. And Harbaugh does have NFL experience. He does have NFL experience running with a young quarterback who can utilize his legs as he did with Kaepernick. And he is kind of that Chicago mold, right? Play defense, pound the football, tough browed. Like, I'm not a huge Jim Harbaugh fan, but his personality and the way that he coaches the game of football does fit in the Windy City. Like, it fits that fan base. It fits what, they have been historically. So it may not end up being the case, but it does seem like a pretty natural fit at this point.
And he played there as well back in his playing days. So he has ties to the organization, even as a player there too. So, yeah, I like the Harbaugh thing. And the more I think about it, the more that makes sense there, especially with the way I think that they're going to try and bring Justin Fields along there. So I like that thought a lot. All right, Giants. We had Alex, you said Kellen Moore. Kevin said Jared Mayo, and I said Todd Bowles. Any changes you're wanting to make there?
I mean, so the reason why I went with Kellen Moore here is because I get that there's only 32 of these jobs available, but I think that in order to take over that situation, you have to be a little naive to what is, real life. And I feel like Kellen Moore, just to be a first-time head coach, would jump at the opportunity to take over any situation as a head coach. But the more I think about it, I don't know that Kellen Moore. I don't know that his personality fits with New York media. I mean, the guy is, Boise State, like he's just not new. He's not New York. He's not big city. Which, don't get me wrong, Dallas Fort Worth, it's a big city, but it's not like the New York media. So I am less hot on Kellen Moore here, but I do have a place that I think Kellen Moore could land coming up.
All right, Alex, Kevin, you sticking with Jared Mayo?
Yeah, I'm sticking with Mayo. I think his personality fits. I think he's from that Belichick tree, which maybe the Giants feel a little scorned after going Joe Judge.
So well the last time.
But, I mean, realistically, like I alluded to last week, the way Belichick talks about this guy, it's only a matter of time before he gets a crack at head coaching. So much for the same reason that Alex said. There's only 32 of these jobs, and they're open for a reason. It's because these teams are dumpster fires. The Giants maybe more so than most, but I think that he could do a very good job kind of bringing some toughness and some grit to that New York Giants team.
I like it. I'm going to go with Todd Bowles. I'm sticking with that one still. I think that you're talking about a guy that has experience with the New York media. He was the New York Jets head coach for a long time there. And that Tampa defense has definitely been stepping up there. So I'm still going to stick with Todd Bowles on that one. Texans, that's a one we didn't get to talk about last week because David Culley was fired after we did the show last week. So, Alex, you've got go ahead and kick off with what you're thinking here.
So this was where I put Kellen Moore. I think that, again, it's an easier landing spot. I just think with again, there's only 32 jobs. You got to be kind of naive to the situation in order to jump on, a head coaching job. But there's another name that I think might be intriguing, just based on, I think the Texans, and actually, the more I think about this may not come to – actually, none of ours may come to fruition based on an interview that I heard with a member of the Houston media. And you'll understand why I think this may not happen. But I throw Vance Joseph's name out there. The guy kind of got a raw deal in Denver.
Did he though?
Okay. I mean – It wasn't a great tenure, but first time you're learning things. But I mean, he did okay in Arizona, and I think he's done enough to impress people again to maybe get another crack at being a head coach somewhere. But based on an interview that I'm just now recalling, I will go more with Kellen Moore, and you guys will understand exactly why the second you kind of connect what all three of these names have in common with Vance Joseph and then your guys' picks.
Really? That's where you're going?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Kevin, who you got going for your Texans head coaching position?
Raheem Morris. I think that, like I said earlier, the coaching job that he has done with this Rams defense and the performance that they put up Monday night has probably earned himself a head coaching gig. I have him going to the Texans, but if the Dolphins decided to go defensive-minded, which none of the three of us think they are at the moment, but I could see the Dolphins bringing Raheem Morris into Miami if they wanted to stay defensively minded at head coach.
Yeah, I like Brian Flores to the Houston Texans there, right? Like they have a franchise quarterback there that is still very much thinking that he is not wanting to play for the organization. This could be a move to do that, right? Like that was the guy champion Deshaun Watson to Miami when all of that was happening during the season. So I could see them trying to bring them in to help try and repair some of the relationships there, as well as the fact that Brian Flores, coming from the Belichick tree, has ties to the GM, who is a former Patriot personnel as well. So, kind of a fit there as far as personalities go, things like that. And they've both come from from an organization that they've worked for in the past. So I'm liking Flores to the Texans there. Guys, any other thoughts on the coaching tree? Anything else we want to spend some time on here?
I think Alex needs to pay off his interview because
I
we're a
do.
day after Martin Luther King Day, and I'm afraid of what he's going to say.
Well, no, and this is exactly what the interview that I heard, and it was with a member of the Houston media. His name escapes me at this time. I apologize about that. But the interview that I heard and the phrasing that he used, and it did stick with me because you don't hear this too often on the radio. But this guy said that the ownership there in Houston, they want to do things the right way. And I said the right way. But he didn't mean the right way. He meant it with a W. And it was very evident that there is a sense of a black coach is not going to get hired in Houston. It was what this media member said, and it's not. It's appalling to hear. But at the same time, not at all surprising that's where that ownership group is. And if you go back and look, what
was it 2 years ago where the McNairs got in trouble because of the crap he said?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that's kind of the overbearing thing is that I don't think if the McNairs are still writing the checks there, I don't think you're going to see a black coach in Houston.
Well, that's
all right.
Extremely unfortunate. That
it is. And again, I am only the messenger here, and it only dawned on me after we picked because I think the guys that we've selected would be fantastic head coaches there. But that appears to be one of the situations that there is, and I'm sure there's more reading about it, and more interviews that this guy's done, but. It is something that I heard that stuck with me, and I obviously recalled it when we went through our list there. But I don't think it's. I mean, a coach is a coach, no matter what skin color they've got. But that apparently is how that organization is being run,
which is crazy. I mean, and even not putting any consideration into this when we were listing head coaches, but. Aside from the Raiders, who we all think the interim coach will remain, through our selections, at least one of the three of us had a minority coach as the head coach selection for each of the remaining teams. These guys are out there, right? And we've talked about some of this. We haven't gotten too far down the rabbit hole just to – it's not the funnest topic to talk about. And at times it's one that people do turn away from. But good Lord. I mean, Eric Bieniemy, he's, 4 years now? Mm-hmm. He's been
he's been the guy that everybody puts
the
on
token Rooney Rule candidate, right?
Yes.
And I don't want to label him as that. He's a great coach. His players have great things to say about him. In Colorado, he was a great player, came up through CU when they were actually still playing football in Boulder, all the things. But super unfortunate because there are a lot of qualified coaching candidates that are not only minorities on our list, but minorities that we're probably not even truly thinking about that maybe we should be. And people like the McNairs are stifling that, and how the NFL hasn't stepped in and rectified that after they tear the Washington football team down and go through all these emails. Honestly, maybe they need to do the same thing to Houston. If this is the crap that's going on, if we want to make a stand, and if the NFL wants to really put their money where their mouth has been, in the it takes all of us to change and end racism and allowing the players to have the slogans and the phrases represented on the back of their helmets. Well, put your money where your mouth is. You're a multi-billion-dollar company that gets out of the top 100 shows in 2020, the NFL had 40 of them as far as viewers.
Far higher than that. 91 of the top 100.
Is that what it was?
Yes. Yes, it was.
So I must have been reading the wrong thing about it then. But that just speaks more to the point. Do something about it. Like this is where they could stand up and really show that they're trying to not only support and promote minority head coaches, but that they're not going to tolerate the, old rich, white man syndrome, essentially, right? That we're talking about here, that just says, no, we're not hiring just because of the color of his skin. That's stupid. Like, really? Like, we're not. How are we not past this yet? We're so childish.
Yeah, and in theory, I mean, this is something too that to keep in mind. There are what is that, 7, 8 head coaching jobs that are open? Is it 7? Right now, though, there's only 2 minority head coaches that are employed in the league. So, I mean, again, we have lists where we think these guys are real legitimate.
The only one at the moment.
Ron Rivera.
Oh yes,
as a minority head coach. But I mean, realistically, it is a it's not something that's all that common, which is unfortunate because a coach is a coach, no matter your skin color. If you're a leader of men, you're a leader of men. If you know the X's and O's, you know the X's and O's. And so, like we have, like you said, Kevin, we've got a minority head coach that we think would fit in great with any one of these openings. I hope that the reality of the situation is that a minority coach gets that opportunity, not because he's a minority coach, but because he's a good NFL coach. But I hope that against the fact of what the current trend is.
How baseball was able to get this right before the NFL is disturbing.
Yeah.
Like, baseball has forever been, the color barrier and all the things, right? I mean, baseball has forever been the old rich white man sport, and we're better than everybody else. And baseball's figured this out before the NFL is. Like, that is troublesome.
Alrighty. Well, let's go ahead and move into our last topic of the evening, and that's going to be a blind player comparison. So kind of set this thing up, give the background for everybody out there listening and watching here. When it comes to this, it's going to be a debate style type of segment here. I know the answer, so I unfortunately don't get to debate this one. But I'm going to give you guys player A, player B, and they're both going to be wide receivers. You get to know their final college stats, their final season that they played college, the stats for that, as well as some player profile type of things that you would see coming from like a combine and some of those types of things there as well. And so the thing that you have to determine is what player are you drafting on draft day if you're a GM. And I'll go a step further than that and kind of give you guys a hint. Both of these guys are graded out at a first round pick. Both of them were drafted as a first round pick. They are some historic players here. These are actual guys. And furthermore, both of them went on to have Hall of Fame careers. So you know that you're drafting a guy in the first round. You know that you're drafting a Hall of Famer. You know that you are drafting a guy that is going to play 10 plus years for at the wide receiver position. So those are kind of be all the hints that I give you here before we start getting into this. So let's go ahead and play this one here. Who are you drafting? You're the NFL GM, and these are how the stats shake out there. The first player, his final year in college, came from an FCS school, 96 receptions, 1,820 receiving yards, 26 touchdowns. As far as a player profile goes, had a 40 speed of 4.25 seconds, a breakout age of 20.6 years old, a college dominator rating of 52.2%, stands at 6'4" and weighs in at 210 pounds. So that's player one. Player two, final year stats, he played for an FCS school as well, 112 receptions, 1,845 yards, 27 touchdowns, had a 40 speed of 4.59, a college breakout age of 20.9, a college dominator of 45.2, stands at 6 foot 2 inches tall and 200 pounds. So, guys, who are you taking? Break it down.
I'll go first. I'm going to take player one, based solely on the fact that he has the size and the speed. I know that this isn't a current NFL player, as you've said, because they've gone on to have Hall of Fame careers. But if I'm looking at trying to get somebody in today's NFL, I want size and speed, and the fact that he can kind of take off the top of a defense on 14, 12, 4, 16 fewer receptions, 25 less yards. But that to me is somebody that I think has value in today's NFL is size and speed. And so I would take player one.
For future reference, can we add their 3-cone drill?
If I can find it, yes.
Well, and the only reason I'm asking is I'd love to see what their agility rankings are. Because
player one was, so I did have some stats on that, was in the 100th percentile for agility ranking. Player two was in the high 90s. I don't have the exact ones on there, but I do remember those types of things. For an agility one, player one ranked out higher as far as agility goes.
With that being the case, I'd go player one as well. That 4.59 just scares me in the NFL a little bit, going up against these cornerbacks who are getting a little bit taller, a little bit longer, and equally as fast. In the NFL, a 4.59 isn't really separation speed, and so then it's coming down to your route running and your agility. And if player one has a better agility ranking, and we can see that coming in, we'll take the big-bodied guy who personally I like more right off the top, even though the NFL is kind of going towards a smaller type receiver, as we see Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Hunter Renfrow, Brandon Cooks, some of these guys who can play outside and inside. But I think I'd agree with Alex here. I think if I were on the clock, player one would be my choice. I like the fact that he's 2 inches taller, runs a 40, a quarter second faster, and really seems to be able to create some separation. And the fact his dominator rankings, if you was a good 7 points higher throughout college, facing seemingly like competition.
All righty. Do we have any guesses as to who player one and player two are?
My guess for player one, I'm a little more iffy on player two. But to me, player one, I believe I'm going to go with Randy Moss.
Okay. Any guesses for player two?
Jerry Rice.
Okay. Kevin, who are your guesses for player one, player two?
I like that Randy Moss pick, Alex. That's 6'4" seems about right. Yeah, I like the player one Randy Moss score. The other one, you said they're in the Hall of Fame already?
Yep.
Ooh.
I'm very iffy on player two.
I really don't know who player two. I don't even have a good guess on who player two is. Nothing jumps off the page at me.
All righty. Well, let's go ahead and head on in. And then once you guys, and then kind of to cap this thing off, once you guys know who those players are for certain, I want you to break it down on if you would change your pick, knowing on what they went on to achieve there. So let's go ahead and reveal our player one, player two here. And Alex, you did have it correct. It was Randy Moss for player one, Jerry Rice for player two. So that being the case, right, you got Randy Moss and Jerry Rice here. Jerry Rice is considered by most to be the greatest wide receiver of all time. Randy Moss was a physical freak, and it was nicknamed that as well. So now that you know that player one was Randy Moss, player two was Jerry Rice, does that change your opinion on who you're drafting?
No, not in the least bit.
Okay.
The only reason I say no is because Randy Moss did it, and he didn't have Joe Montana throwing him the football.
He only had Tom Brady.
Steve Young throwing him the football. Yeah, but for the prime of his career, he was stuck in Minnesota where he didn't have Jerry Rice or didn't have Joe Montana and Steve Young throwing him the football.
Oh, but he still had Randall Cunningham and Dante Culpepper, who put up pretty good years there. That also being the case, I would actually argue that Randy Moss's prime was when he was in New England.
Ooh, debate for another day.
That could be a debate for another day.
I don't know that it changes my mind because I like those big X receivers, and Randy Moss was able to play the big X and stretch a defense, and he was such a red zone threat. The thing that does make me lean towards, for argument's sake, for Jerry Rice is he played in a much more physical NFL. So the fact that you get that skill set and that player, and now you're playing in a league where they can't really touch you, and you're the right size to play outside or inside, where Randy Moss can't really play out of the slot at 6'4". That's a little bit harder. That 6'2" size is perfect for doing both. Man, oh man, does that look from a utility standpoint, right? From being able to go outside in, mix up formations, get the mismatches where you're not always having the corner with the safety over the top. You have to bring them into the slot where they're playing off coverage and they're not able to get their hands on you even more so. I would
kind
not
of feel like a
surprised.
current
What's that?
49ers wide receiver?
A little bit, doesn't it?
I mean, he's not taking snaps out of the backfield, I promise you that.
Yes.
But if you took Randy Moss, I would not shed one tear or lose an ounce of sleep over my consolation prize of Jerry Rice.
Fair enough.
There you go.
How about that?
I like it. And that's one of those two that you could also look at that too, looking back on it from a hindsight type of perspective now that you know who they are and you know kind of what career you would get onto those things. Randy Moss's peak in his prime might have been a little bit higher than Jerry Rice, but it was certainly a much shorter time frame there as well, whereas Jerry Rice went on to 20 plus years in the NFL and was extremely productive through the vast majority of those things, and more productive later in his career, nearing the age of 40 than a lot of guys are as they near the age of 30 at the same position. So very interesting to kind of see and kind of play there, but always kind of fun to sit there and give you guys some blind player comparisons, some blind things where you don't necessarily, you've got to make a decision off of a little bit smaller sample size and a little bit smaller data set there, and always kind of fun to see how that one plays out there. But guys, any final thoughts for tonight?
Let it be noted that I got both of those players right.
Yes, I'm.
Congratulations.
I know FCS football, which is not a great thing to know about, but I know FCS football.
Although if you know FCS football, you could draft guys like Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, and Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, some dude named Cooper Kupp from Eastern Washington.
Exactly. So, I mean, Alex, you would put together one heck of a receiving core.
Tony Romo.
Some cat named James Robinson that was showing out the last 2 years too.
See, I mean, you could spend all of this draft capital in the later rounds and still get some very, very, very good production there. I like it. So, cool. You guys, any other thoughts here? Any final thoughts for the listeners and viewers out there?
Everybody have a good week. Stay warm. Be safe. And, enjoy the football coming up this weekend. We don't have too many football weekends left. So enjoy them while they're here and come join us in this DFS competition. Let's see how you stack up against us.
I would echo that. Come join us in the DFS. Hit us up on Twitter to get the entry code to that. And we will tease ahead to what we'll have next week. And we will talk about how many teams have a franchise quarterback. And I think we'll also give you a teaser on this one as well. And these guys don't know about it yet unless they were just looking at the show doc. Is it time to pump the brakes on Cooper Kupp for next year? We'll discuss that too.
I like that. That could be a great dynasty type of topic there as well, right? Like, is this the sell high moment on Cooper Kupp? Do you ride it out? what does that look like? So yeah, we'll absolutely get into that debate there as well. Guys, if you've got a topic that you want us to debate and you want us to talk about, shoot us those DMs, right? Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Good Old Boys FF. Hit us up there. Let us know what if you got a player, name that player guest that you want me to put the boys through here, or if you've got a debate style type of question that you want us to hit up there. Things like that, absolutely. And make sure that you're hitting us up for that FanDuel invite there as well. And one of the best ways to help support this independent podcast is head over to YouTube, the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast YouTube channel. Click the subscribe button, ring the bell, get the notifications for when we go live. We'll be doing this Tuesday show, 11 p.m. Eastern, live for you up until the start of the new season, when we'll kick back up and start bringing more live episodes for you as well. But guys, that's going to call it a night for us. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.